Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, September 15th. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you on this episode. We have a lot of baseball news to catch up on from the weekend. We have two prospects getting called up for playoff pushes. One in San Francisco in Bryce Eldridge. One pitching in Toronto, Trey Yesavage. We'll talk about their expected impact here in just a few minutes. We'll take a look at the big series on tap for the start of this week because the wild cards in both leagues, those last wild card spots, are still very much up for grabs. Have a quick look at where the money went this weekend as we try and scramble our way to fantasy championships. So, we have a lot to get to. I think we had a collective sigh of relief over the weekend when Tarik Skubal had to leave Friday's start with side tightness, but we had that sigh of relief with the news. The imaging came back clean, and he could make his next scheduled start Thursday against Cleveland. I'm going to believe it when I see it, even though things appear to be trending in a very positive direction for Skubal to this point, because I just don't think you would take any chances whatsoever if he's still feeling less than 100% as Thursday approaches.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing is wanting to keep him on schedule and, all that stuff. But with their cushion in the standings, I'd say it's a less than 50% chance that he makes that start.
Right. The main thing you'd be thinking about is making sure that you have the first round bye. The Jays have the best record in the American League right now. The Tigers would also get a bye as the number 2 seed if things hold where they currently are. So maybe that's the other consideration here.
But they
Guardians,
are
6.5 back, probably aren't going to catch them.
They're 3 games up on the Mariners for that one, right? It's not like the Mariners are playing with their hair on fire.
No, and there's some AL West on AL West crime about to happen in the next couple of days that we'll talk about too, which also probably helps their cause. So we'll see if Skubal progresses well. I know there were some folks out there saying, if the Tigers lose Tarik Skubal for any stretch during the postseason, they're cooked. I don't think that's necessarily true. We have some recent evidence of teams dealing with key players being down, including pitchers, right? The Rangers World Series run happened
the Braves
without
winning that
Jacob deGrom.
Without Acuna, even.
Yeah, it happens. It doesn't make it harder, of course it does. But I think Tarik Skubal is going to be okay in the playoff sense. I'm a little skeptical if you're setting a weekly lineup on Monday based on what we know right now. That start's definitely going to happen. The good news is that they could push him back a few more days. Maybe he'd start over the weekend. He'd still get a start this week, but I don't know. I don't want to take them at their word in this particular instance, given how important he is for them in October. A lot of injuries, though, around the league. Jose Altuve got hurt Saturday, was held out Sunday. I don't know what it is about this team and the timing of their injuries right now. It just feels like every day you look and it's someone else who went down today, right? That's the main question, I guess, with the Astros. In the words of Joe Espada, Altuve was still feeling pretty sore and continues to be evaluated by team doctors. They're calling it right foot discomfort. I think the Astros have pretty quickly moved up in the rankings of organizations whose injury reports are hard to rely upon. Evidence includes Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, and plenty of others to pick from along the way. Any thoughts here on Altuve, though, as the Astros just try and hold it together for their upcoming series this week against the Rangers?
I mean, actually, I just think that this organization is really weird about injuries. There's something strange. Listen to this note about Isaac Paredes. Astros general manager Dana Brown said that Paredes' hamstring could be activated from the 60-day injury list during next weekend's series versus the Mariners. Though Brown conceded that Paredes' return by that time could be a long shot. Matt Kawahara of the Houston Chronicle reports. What? Why did you say he could be and then it could be a long shot? Like, I don't know, man. This whole thing with the Tucker and the Alvarez injury. There's something. I think what they want to do as an organization is not give you information about injury, and I don't know why they think that's in their best interest. But maybe it has to do with scouting, advanced scouting, gamesmanship with the current lineup. Will he be in the lineup or won't he? Make the other team prepare for everybody that could be in the lineup sort of situation. But whatever reason it is, they don't really give out much information. I remember Altuve had a knee injury that ended up needing surgery, and we all kind of thought it was headed towards surgery. And we had a scrum where we were asking him, what's going on with the knee? And he said, you have to ask the team. And you're just like, oh, okay, so you can't tell us yourself what's going on with your knee? Any case, Altuve's been great as a 35-year-old to still be 12% better than league average and hit 25 homers and play as well as he had. But that's always the risk with older players, is that they have these injuries and it slows them down. I don't have any other thing to say except that when they say he's still feeling pretty sore, and then they are non-committal about when he's back in the lineup, I guess I would just take the under on people on the Astros coming back when the team says they will.
Yeah, the report will probably be more optimistic than the actual result. It's a good takeaway, I think, based on how they've been handling things so far. Busy week for them, all at home, 2-3 game series. They start with the Rangers. That begins on Monday. It's a Monday to Wednesday series, off day Thursday. And then they catch the Mariners at home,
and that
Friday to Sunday.
Mariners series is huge because that determines the tiebreak. I think they're tied.
Grabs.
Yes, in the season series. So, and there's no more game 163. So if this ends up, making them, ends up in a tie at the top of the division, this series this week will determine that. Who actually is the winner of the division. I don't know if that's necessarily true for the Rangers, but the Rangers could get back in this pretty quickly with a sweep or even a series win, because they're kind of staying alive longer than I thought they would, given all their injuries. And it's been mostly pitching, I think, from perusing the box scores. So just a really, really pivotal week. This is the week. This is the week for the Astros. And I bet you Altuve starts playing again on Wednesday or Thursday.
An interesting thing here, they're 5-5.
They had a game on. They have no game on Thursday. So.
They're off Thursday, but they're 5-5 against the Mariners. So you're absolutely right. That series will determine home field or a tiebreaker for there. And they're 4-6 right now against the Rangers on the season.
Oh,
one loss
so
to the Rangers
are protecting a tiebreak
gives the Rangers the tiebreak. So it's going to take a lot for this Astros team to put themselves in that sort of ideal position to get both of those tiebreakers, given all the injuries they're dealing with. And then the pitching matchups. You mentioned the Rangers; their pitching's been really good. It's some of the guys you'd expect. A few like Jacob Latz maybe stepping up and surprising you. The way the pitching matchups line up for the Astros series, it's Leiter versus Jason Alexander in the first game, which I think is probably advantage Rangers, at least slightly.
Yes. Second
Merrill
one,
Kelly,
advantage Rangers.
Yeah, Merrill Kelly versus Christian Javier in Javier's current form, advantage Rangers. And then Jacob deGrom, it might be against Jaden Murray.
Yeah. And then it gets a little better for them in the Seattle series because at least they have Hunter Brown and Fromber going.
Yep.
But Seattle has Brian Wu, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert all in a row.
Right.
So I would take at least Logan Gilbert over Jason Alexander in game 3. And as much as Hunter Brown and Fromber are like my favorite, maybe 1-2 in the game, Brian Wu and Kirby might play them to a standstill in terms of who has the advantage pitching wise, at least among the starters. And then you have this whole, the bullpen not being quite as good with Hader being out, and the Seattle bullpen kind of seemingly coming online right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be a fun week of series, not just that one as we begin the final fortnight of the MLB regular season. That's like using Fortnite. Isn't it perfect? I don't know. I find it to be pretty good. Let's talk about some other news you should know. Bryce Eldridge coming up to join the Giants, and we'll do a full breakdown once we get a look at him here in a couple of these early week games. Big series for the Giants on the NL side, going up against Arizona, two teams trying to displace the Mets as the final wild card in the NL. Both teams within reach of that playoff spot. Giants enter the week 1.5 back of the Mets. Diamondbacks just 2 games back. So we need a sweep. We need one team to sweep the other one. And as just someone who wants to see some chaos, I don't actually care who it is. I really don't. But I'm excited to see Bryce Eldridge at the big league level. And I think if it weren't for injuries at AAA this season, we probably would have seen a promotion of Bryce Eldridge earlier this year. He had to make up for some lost time at that AAA level.
The Arizona Diamondbacks come with Zach Gallen and then Eduardo Rodriguez and Brandon Pfaadt. I think the Eduardo Rodriguez start will be an interesting one for people that are wondering how often Eldridge will play, because he's a lefty, but so is Rafael Devers. On the other hand, what I expect to happen is that Eldridge becomes mostly the full-time DH. There have been some, questions about his defense, but maybe in game one, he starts in first base, so he's on the field and he gets the full feeling. So something where him and Devers are sharing first base and DH basically in the end, with Wilmer Flores being the one that takes the back seat. Wilmer Flores didn't play in a game for 5 straight games with against righties earlier this month, and his playing time has really fallen off. So, the big question will be, will Wilmer Flores or Bryce Eldridge start that game against Eduardo Rodriguez? And I guess my guess is Wilmer Flores, but that still gives Bryce Eldridge, 2/3 of the job of a full-time job.
Yeah, the pitching matchups for that series, we'll run through those real quick. Gallen versus Kai-Wei Tang, that still probably favors Arizona, even though Gallen hasn't quite been himself this year, to put it mildly.
I mean, Tang has not great command and not great fastball, and those two things in tandem are a tough way to make a business.
Yeah. And then we've got yet another Seymour, of course. We have Carson Seymour scheduled to start the second game of that series against Eduardo Rodriguez. That one probably... Is that
the over?
Right, yeah. Just expect runs. This is a series being played in Arizona, too, so that certainly helps from that perspective.
The interesting thing about Carson Seymour, other than the fact that he was aware that there were no Seymours for 100 years in the big leagues, and he was aware of Bob and Ian, he says that he's actually played in some leagues with Bob and knew Bob and has taken pictures as fellow Seymours. Bob Seymour is the first baseman for the Rays. That they know each other. So that's some Seymour-related business. But Carson Seymour, his arsenal is Clay Holmes. It's missing one big thing that Clay Holmes has that Carson Seymour says he's going to spend the offseason refining. A sweeper. It's pretty important.
It does seem important for the Clay Holmes arsenal.
Yeah, because Clay Holmes is that elite sinker and that elite sweeper with a bunch of other pitches around it. Carson Seymour has a pretty good curveball. It's better than Clay Holmes's curveball. But he also doesn't have a changeup. So if he can come back next year and be, sinker sweeper with a curveball as sort of the changeup, as long as he can keep them separate. I mean, that's another thing. He could add the sweeper and lose the curveball. It would still be better for him, but he's in that sort of sinker sweeper starter package. He's missing some key components.
Yeah. So there's your Carson Seymour scouting report. If you were kind of wondering what he brings to the table, you got Verlander versus Brandon Pfaadt in the final game of that series on Wednesday. I think
that might be a push too.
I think I'm leaning a little more towards Verlander. I know it's been a rough season for him overall. He's looked a little better lately. I mean, go back to, let's say, mid-August, last 5 starts or so now. He's doing good work on those ratios. He's gone at least 5 in all but one of those starts. He's gone 6 or more in 4 out of those starts. So I think Verlander maybe, just maybe, is rounding into a better form at just the right time for this Giants team. Brandon Pfaadt is the mystery wrapped into a riddle that just can't quite turn the corner no matter what. I'd love to see it. I have stopped expecting it.
I'm really interested to see Bryce Eldridge's swing speeds and shape, because I'm usually turned off by 30% strikeout rates in the minor leagues, and he hasn't had just like he is anointed sort of minor league stretch. Like he's definitely had some struggles and some poor batting averages and OBPs and questions about his defense. There was a point where he was just rocketing through the minors, but that sort of slowed down this year. Is he Nick Kurtz? And I got this one wrong because I traded away some shares of Eldridge this year. If he's Nick Kurtz and he can hold the 30% strikeout rate, but just do so much damage, that's one thing. But even if he is Nick Kurtz, he's Nick Kurtz in San Francisco, which is going to be a little bit tougher road to hoe. So I'm really interested to see what the shape of the swing is and what the bat speed is.
Yeah, I think with Eldridge too, I mean, a guy that was drafted out of high school, still very young. He's going to debut as a 20-year-old. I don't think we see a lot of Giants position players debuting at 20. It's probably a pretty short list. You go back through history of that franchise. But even Nick Kurtz, if you look at his swing and miss, the brief time he was at AAA, 26.8%, right? Like that's I think an alarming AAA K rate, not a can't make it work sort of K rate, of course. And Kurtz has been phenomenal so far. I think the age factor gives me a little more buffer on Eldridge too. There could be some more improvement in terms of actual swing decisions that could whittle away at that just a little bit. And it hasn't been 30% everywhere. That's the prospect profile that sends up all the red flags. When you see consistent 30% up and down the board, down as low as A ball. Eldridge, I think, has tempered whiffs well enough at previous stops where I'm leaving my mind open to the possibility that there could be just a little bit of that ABS weirdness that nudged him up over 30%. He's going to swing and miss, but I think he's going to get to that power a lot. And we know the Giants have been looking for a bat like this for a long time. So my assumption is they brought him up with the intention of giving him pretty regular run. That big side platoon usage you hinted at would make a lot of sense just based on how the roster's built.
Since 1964, rookies 20 and younger for the Giants include Madison Bumgarner.
Right. Yep. Bumgarner on the pitching side for sure.
But you said hitting, and the high water mark is 83 plate appearances from, drumroll please, a Mr. Ken Henderson.
Okay. Yeah. It's been a while. What year was that?
That was in 1965.
Okay.
And he had 83 plate appearances with nary a home run, a stolen base, and hit 192. So the next one is Gary Thomason, who had 28 plate appearances. Next one is Mark Grant. I think he's a pitcher. So Jack Clark is a good player that did debut before 20, but only had 19 plate appearances before he turned 20.
All right.
So I guess this could be most similar is Jack Clark, because Jack Clark came up with the 1975 Giants, had 19 plate appearances and then he had 115 in 1976, and then he became a full-time player in 77. And then he had a pretty good little career.
Yeah, 340 homers. The more you know.
So he also had like a 10% strikeout rate. So that's going to be something that Eldridge has to navigate, that big strikeout rate.
The other prospect promoted by a team vying for playoff position, one that's in playoff position atop the AL East, the Blue Jays have brought up Trey Yesavage. I wondered if they were going to do this at some point in the second half because they hadn't done it already. I was a little surprised that they finally made the announcement this weekend that he's going to come up and start on Monday. I guess the goal is to make this debut as, quote, normal as possible. So I don't know if this is going to be full starter usage necessarily. I don't know if this is the plan beyond Monday, but Trey Yesavage comes up with 160 strikeouts in 98 innings across 4 different minor league levels this year. Yeah, that strikeout rate will play. It was most recently 26 Ks and 17 in the third innings at AAA Buffalo. He could miss bats. We've seen some pretty juicy, in a bad way, walk rates. These are all limited samples, and we've got a very over-the-top delivery from Trey Yesavage, probably about as over-the-top as anybody we see in the game right now, because you can't really get much more over-the-top than this.
And so this will put some pressure on the Stuff Plus model because we use imputed arm angle. It's guessing what that arm angle is. I will say it may not have as much trouble as it does with Jonah Tong, who has, 7.5 foot extension and drops down and does all sorts of weird stuff. This looks like maybe Release Point can tell you a lot about this arm angle. So maybe the model is fine. We always knew that he had good stuff. So, this model is telling us 107 stuff plus on the four seam, 94 location plus on the four seam. Not great. Splitter 127 stuff plus. That's his best secondary pitch. Terrible location plus on it. So there's going to be some pressure on the slider and the cutter, which are 105 and 104 stuff plus with 83 and 93 location plus respectively. So if he can't locate the slider and cutter, he's going to get keyholed a little bit. And there could be some issues there. I would say that I think the most likely role for him is out of the pen. Just given the robustness in the rotation. Have you heard any different?
They're going to start him against Tampa Bay on Monday, but
okay.
I guess I don't know if the way they described it, it didn't make it seem like he's a regular part of the rotation going forward for the rest of this season. And he had thrown in relief for a couple of his appearances in Buffalo.
Yeah, and they have Barrios, Gossman, Bassett, Scherzer, Bieber, so they have a full 5.
It's just the question is,
are they going to 6? And so the next one would be Sunday at the Royals. That's a pretty good 2-step if he goes 5 and can get a win. But what if he goes 4 in each of those? That's the question. And I think maybe, and like in the bullpen in the playoffs is an almost guarantee. I just mentioned that because I think this team could use a little help in the bullpen. And with a unique slot like that, with high stuff, he could end up being like their setup man in the playoffs. I think the upside is that good. What he does in the short term is going to be confounding for fantasy players as they try to figure out how deep he'll go if he gets that second start and all those, semi-important questions if you're trying to put him in as a 2-start guy.
Yeah, I'm cautious about the role, though, because I do think the better short-term fits the bullpen. And we're at the point now where with off days, some teams have an off day Thursday, some have one next Monday, some have one today. Manipulating the order of your starters to line it up for the playoff calendar is also something teams might be thinking about. There's also teams that are going to have buys that are going to have a full chance to reset. But I do think some of that plays into what you see teams do if they add a starter to provide rest. It's also to get the schedule where they want it.
Yeah, and like there's just this funny note on Eric Lauer. Blue Jays manager John Schneider says that Lauer will shift to the bullpen for the remainder of the season as the team transitions back to a 5-man rotation. Arden Swelling of Sportsnet reports. Wonder what he thinks of the Trey Yesavage start today.
Well, it was 2 weeks ago. Things change, and it's a debut, right? Like
still can be happy about it for sure.
Yeah, if you could have been the person making that start, and you would like to make that start, it probably frustrates you on some level. But hey, maybe Eric Lauer's a good teammate, and he's just happy to see Trey Yesavage coming up on Monday. We're curious to see what that command really looks like and how big league hitters respond to that mix.
I also think Louis Varland is going to be super important for them in the playoffs. He was throwing 94 mile an hour changeups in his last outing. Looked pretty nasty.
That's pretty gross. 94 mile an hour changeups are disgusting. Complimentary. Some more baseball news you should know. I saw a note that Kyle Tucker has not resumed running yet, so he will not return from the IL as he becomes eligible to do so on Tuesday. So we'll keep an eye on that for some updates. I think the goal here is to say, let's get Kyle Tucker feeling as good as we can leading into the playoffs. Ideally, maybe you get him some reps, at least during the final series of the season, but for now, no clear timetable on when he's going to be activated. Tough news if you're in a weekly league, and we're hoping that he'd be back within the minimum. We did have some questions, though, in the Discord about Seiya Suzuki and what has happened to him over the course of the second half of the season. Suzuki looked like he was consolidating all the skills he'd flashed over his first few big league seasons into one massive year. If you go back and look at the first half splits, and he's still having a very good year. He's got a big league career high 27 homers this season. 17% barrel rate kind of backs it up. Getting to that power more consistently by lifting the ball as much as he's ever lifted it generally seems like a good thing, but it hasn't been a consistent slash line in line with his previous years. It's the worst average we've seen at 244. It's the worst OBP at 324. So still hitting the ball hard, doing more damage in terms of homers, but this isn't quite everything clicking the way it appeared to be earlier this year. So what's going on with Seiya?
He traded some of that OBP for slugging. It's pretty clear. If you look at this chart, you'll see that he was pulling the ball more than ever at the beginning of the season. That's where the homers came from. But what happened is, and you can see this if you look at his intercept, his contact point, is that in 2023, it was, 29 to 30 inches out in front of his body. In 2024, it was 31 to 33. He started this year at 33, and then he got up to 36 inches out in front of him. So it's been a steady march forward. But as you can see from this chart, what happens with that intercept being further out in front of his body, his chase rate has gone up. And that's part of his fundamental identity as a player, is that he's not a guy who chases. He has been a guy who lets the ball travel. So what I see here is just a finagling of the contact point. He is a guy that at his base wants to let the ball travel, go the other way, get on base, take walks. He did want to hit for more power, so he went and got the ball, and then he got too far out in front. And that's why the chase peaked in July and August. And what you've seen since is the intercept point has come back a little bit. He's letting the ball travel a little bit more. He's seeing the ball more. He's chasing the ball a lot less. That red line at the bottom, his chase has gone back to even better than it's been in the last few years. And the pull has come down. So I think it's just the story of, a guy making adjustments over the course of the year. It is, I think, interesting within the context of like, hey, I have a core identity. Can I add something to that core identity without messing my core identity?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the answer is given this result for him. I would say yes. I think he added something to his tool bag this year. He can go get the ball, And now the trick is, can he also let the ball travel? Like, can he put that both on the same table so that he kind of varies it from pitch to pitch without messing up too much? Can he manage that? Is he, or is it something that he has to manage week to week in terms of where his contact point is? So I do think the best players, you hear Jed talk about this. He talks about contact point, and he talks about I need to be at the right contact point for the right pitch at the right place. And so I think the best players do some anticipation and some okay, I think he's going to do a fastball here. I'm going to go get this thing, or it's 2 strikes. I think it might be fastball. I'm going to let this one travel. I think that sort of decision-making process is what he's fine-tuning right now. So I'm not super pessimistic. I know that some of those numbers went down as WRC plus went down, but I like that his power went up, and I hope that he's just adding something to his repertoire.
So within the first half, Seiya Suzuki was a top 20 hitter among fantasy players. He actually hit more homers in the first half of the season than Pete Alonso did, 25 homers in the first half, 2 so far in the second. And most recently, just this past weekend series against the Rays, he didn't play at all. He's been sidelined by an illness. He's not expected to play on Monday either. So there's that to get over in the immediate future. But I do think you're right. It's adding something and then having to adjust to how maybe you're pitched differently in the interim. And it seems like the lack of chase more recently is a nudge back in that direction. If you said, predict what's going on with Seiya Suzuki in the final 2 weeks and into the postseason, I think he's going to look more like the first half guy, or more like the guy we've seen for the bulk of his career than the guy he's been in the second half, just based on some of those swing decisions getting back in order. But definitely a lumpy, I'll call it a lumpy season for Seiya Suzuki, where the first half was great, second half, not everything that you're hoping for as a Cubs fan or as a fantasy manager. You think, hey, Seiya Suzuki's going to be one of the reasons why I win a championship. And now you're saying, hey, can I keep starting him? Got to keep an eye on the day-to-day situation at least.
I would be interested in research that looked at contact point changes, big contact point changes, and what that meant for the player. You know, you can't, it won't be something where it's like, oh, changing contact point equals good, because there's going to be some where it's, you know, it's not a good reason. Like Mookie is getting the ball not as far out in front a little bit because he's hurt, or he was hurt, you know, where he's down in terms of energy and physicality. But I'm also just interested also in the stickiness of a contact point rate change, right? Because this is what we're talking about with Seiya. Is like he changes contact point, but then he found some negative feedback from that, and now he's maybe kind of traveling a little bit back towards to where he was more comfortable.
Yeah, I think there's not a snap answer. Is it good? Well, it depends based on a lot of other factors. Some other news you should know. We saw Brandon Woodruff's next start get pushed back. He's going to start Wednesday against the Angels. His last outing was actually September 6th. So that's going to put him on about a 10 days rest between starts, basically a full skip turn. Last time out, Woodruff was really good. 6 scoreless, 8 Ks, no walks, just 2 hits against the Pirates. And I noticed that all but one of his turns in the rotation so far since coming off the IL have come more than the standard 4 days of rest. They've used a 6-man rotation for stretches. I think this is mostly by design and trying to make sure he's fully recovered between outings. Where it becomes more of an issue is when the schedule gets more compact in the postseason. So do you have any thoughts about guys that have been working with extra rest during the regular season, having to work on tighter schedules, and the possible impact that has on their effectiveness from outing to outing in the postseason?
I think that they will just manage him where he needs to take regular rest in the playoffs. I don't think that they'll give him the extra rest anymore. But I don't think that they'll use him the way, you know, like a Bumgarner was used against the Royals. Like, you know, it's like they're not going to use him on question. They're not going to use him on throw days. They're not going to. I don't think they'll use him on short rest. That makes no sense. And I think they'll just try to get lucky by using him early. So maybe you'll find that Woodruff comes before Mizorowski, and you're like, maybe I would use Mizorowski first. But the idea is that Mizorowski may be more likely to come back in a series. And what you're hoping is that Woodruff starts early in a series and doesn't start again in that series.
Right. You win the series, you advance, he starts the next one. Yeah.
And he gets more rest. And, you know, so that they play that way. So that's, if he's their, I wouldn't be surprised if he's their game 2 starter.
Yeah, that would not be a surprise to me whatsoever if that was the plan, especially in those longer series. Maybe they get to like the LCS round you're talking about, have him go in 1 or 2, then he can go in 6 or 7. Yeah, get him as far away as possible. That might be the best case scenario for how they use Woodruff. In terms of pitches per outing, 85, 90, 97, and 94 now in his last 4 starts. There were 2 kind of clunkers at the beginning of that stretch, where, well, even the start against Toronto wasn't that good. There was some defensive stuff that happened, I believe, in that one too. But anyway, the worry you have is just that part of being as effective as he's been has been the result of feeling really good and having that extra rest, and taking that away could make things more challenging in October.
Generally, his stuff has been improving. I mean, there's been some unevenness. There's like a game where he had like 92 mile an hour fastball against the Pirates. But he's generally trending upward in terms of the velocity and stuff, and retaining all that really great command.
That's been huge. The command has been a big part of Woodruff's success so far, coming off of the major shoulder injury. Some other news you may have missed over the last few days. We'll kind of tie this all together. Cole Ragans actually coming back for the Royals on Wednesday. It's going to follow Michael Wacha's return on Tuesday. The bummer is the Royals start a series on Tuesday against Seattle. They're now 6.5 back, or 6 games back for that final wild card. So they're basically in spoiler mode, but at least in the case of Ragans, just seeing him get back, possibly make a couple of starts before the end of the season, gives us that snapshot we're often looking for a pitcher to know that they're healthy going into the winter, instead of having unanswered questions about how they look off after a long layoff.
I mean, this is in some ways a last chance saloon for them, because this is one of the last chances that the Royals have to directly play someone that's in the wild card race, you know, that they can push out. So, you know, like if they swept Seattle, they'd have 78 wins and Seattle would have 82. And, maybe we'd be talking a little bit differently about them next week.
Most likely, no. But yes, you're right. Still technically alive, and at least they got a shot at a team that they could make up a little bit of ground.
But then they
against.
get Toronto right after that, which is just, man, tough going.
No easy paths there. We did see Will Smith land on the IL for the Dodgers, that hand injury. So just a heads up on that. If you're scrambling at catcher, it's not a surprise because everyone's scrambling at catcher. I had one league, this weekend, had to replace two. Had to replace both O'Hoppe.
I just didn't replace Will Smith in one league.
You just didn't because there's nothing there.
It was backdated. I'm just, what was out there was not fun. So I was just hoping for an early return.
Yeah, the double whammy catcher injury. It's always fun to have to pick up two catchers in the same week. Had achievement unlocked on my oft-injured Tout Wars squad. Other injury notes to pass along. Adolis Garcia returned for the Rangers. Big for them as they get that series against Houston. Did have a Royals note on Carlos Estevez, too. He left Sunday's appearance with back tightness. We'll see if that matters with the off day on Monday for them. Before that, aforementioned series against Seattle. Kodai Senga still at AAA for the Mets, trying to put the pieces back together. I think when we talked about his opt-out previously, that actually has an innings requirement. He has to get to 400 innings over the first 3 years of his deal, which he won't. So he's not going to have the option to opt out. It's just a 5-year deal with the Mets. So.
Thanks for the clarification on that.
Good to know that he does not have that choice. This caught my eye. Royce Lewis has 10 steals now this year, and 7 of them have come in September alone. And I find it particularly odd that a player with multiple ACL tears like Royce Lewis and a history of just leg injuries beyond the ACL tears would increase how much he's running at a point when the Twins are playing for nothing. So I'm trying to put it together. Is this a good thing? Is this a sign that Royce Lewis is going to bring back this facet of his game? Because it would certainly make things more interesting thinking about what his 2026 might look like if we want to say that steals are a part of this profile again.
Yeah, I think it's actually a little interesting thing for all Twins. I mean, we have Matt Wallner stealing 3 bases. We have Trevor Larnach, who it says in his Fangraphs write-up as a prospect that he is a bit of a plotter.
I thought he was a lug.
A lug, that's it.
He's the lug. Trevor Larnach's the lug.
Brooks Lee has even got a steal, and it looks like the Twins have maybe trying something out. They're trying their go-go baseball pants on because they are second in baseball in steals over the last month. And it's up for all of them. And I think maybe some of it is looking at who they have. And you're saying, I have a Luke Keeschel. He can run pretty well. Even Brooks Lee, who is a bit slower than you might expect, can run a little bit. I've got Austin Martin and Byron Buxton. Like, why aren't we with this young player core? We've traded away a lot of the older guys. Why don't we just go for it and put a lot of pressure on other teams with the stolen base? So if that's true, when you see a league or a team, if you see a team-wide change like this, it's often sticky because it's just a question of, what are my coaches telling them to do? It's a strategy thing. So what we found is that, just taking off in spring means that you're more likely to steal more bases in the regular season. That's a big finding from Jason Collette. Every year he tracks that. And you can track team aggressiveness in spring training and be like, oh, this team, the Nationals, were a team that started stealing a bunch in the spring and then they've been stealing ever since. So, this I think is signal. There's something here. I think all of the Twins are going to steal more bases than we might project them for next year.
Yeah, it's a pretty massive shift because in the first half of the season, based on base running runs above average, the Twins were the worst base running team in baseball at a minus 6.1. The worst. Just for the other end of the spectrum, top of that list, Brewers, Cubs, Rangers, Phillies, Rays are the top 5. So to see the Twins go from the absolute bottom to be a team that's actually running the bases well, it's not just the fact they're even stealing, they're just running the bases better.
Yeah, third
overall.
in base running runs in the last 30.
Yeah, but that's a interesting in-season shift and one that probably does give us some indications of some changes in the long run. So something to keep in mind as you look for extra bags for the final 2 weeks of this season. One other news item to get to here, Travis Baserunning is on the 7-day IL with what the Guardians are calling left flank soreness. He was starting to hit a little better at AAA Columbus before this injury. I'm guessing this ends his season.
That makes me hungry.
Yeah, flank steak tacos is where that's kind of what I want.
Sorry. Who heard his flank? All I heard flank and was like, I'm hungry.
Yeah, it's Travis Baserunning. For all the hungry folks out there. It's lunchtime for me too, so it's almost time to go. What did you do this weekend as far as your pickups to bolster your roster? Anything interesting that you added?
Connolly Early, Tyler Wells. Connolly Early more on talent. Wells, I'm not saying I don't think Wells is talented, but I think he's a little bit more schedule dependent. I'm a little nervous about Tyler Wells in non-good schedules, but he has a good schedule this week. Picked up Heriberto Hernandez, who's just still playing, still hitting for power. And in my TGFBI league, where I have moved into 5th place overall, which is fun because I don't think I've ever won an overall thing. So it would be, to win the TGFBI worth hundreds of fantasy analysts and writers would be a real treat. In that one, I picked up Sean Burke for his 2-start. I'm not even sure I'm going to start him though. So it could just be $12 I wasted, but it's nice to have the option and to if somebody else is trying to 2-start their way into points away from me, I don't want them to be able to do that. So even if it's just a defensive bid, I feel good about it. The offensive bid, the one I was really excited about was Jacob Latz. And I've talked about here that I really like Jacob Latz. And I think he's in the rotation next year. And he's got a really interesting fastball changeup situation. And he's got a little bit more. He reminds me a little bit of who's the Royals lefty?
Ragans?
No, the less velo one.
Cameron.
The one who's got hurt. Chris Bubich.
Oh,
reminds me a little bit
the other one.
He reminds me of Bubich, but Jacob Latz sits 94. So, there's a little bit less command than Bubich, maybe, or just more walks. But I'm also intrigued to see where Jacob Latz's strikeout rate lands. Because with that type of velo from the left side, it could be just enough to put it together. Plus, the results have been there for Latz, and the model says they should be. So I'm into Jacob Latz. If you can pick him up in dynasty leagues or in keeper leagues, I think even like a 12-10 team situation where you're rebuilding, to have that as your final pitcher, at least have him as an option, see what he's doing in spring, see if he has a job. I think he should be owned universally.
Yeah, probably going to go out to the top 300 overall next year, but could be one of those early streaming options at the very least, with that likely path into the Rangers rotation. All right, I mentioned a few big series for this final fortnight. We got to the Rangers Astros a little bit earlier, Giants D-backs. Reds Cards still matters too, man. The Reds are only 2.5 back of the Mets. If they're going to do anything, they got to take care of business against the St. Louis team that's kind of just playing out the string here for these final 2 weeks.
Yeah, but it's not like the St. Louis team is terrible.
No, they're not. They're pesky.
Yeah, so it's not just something where they can steamroll through it. And the probables are interesting because the real strength of the Cincinnati team is their starters, but they are not necessarily running the A group out against St. Louis. It's going to be Littell, Abbott, and Singer. They've done well this year. And it's nice for the Reds that they then go with Green, Lodolo against the Cubs in those first 2 games. So this is a big week for Cincinnati. This is sort of a little bit like the Kansas City situation where, if they play really well this week, maybe we're talking about them differently. They're a little bit closer than Kansas City and have fewer rungs to jump. But they also, this is a tough week for them. I mean, even if they clean up house in St. Louis and win 2 or 3, then they go into the Cubs. Have the Cubs at home, but the Cubs are a really good team.
Yeah. A lot going on in the NL, though, because the Padres are visiting the Mets. That series will start on Tuesday, so nothing easy for the Mets to start the week with San Diego coming to town. And
King versus, I mean, the Mets right now, the rotation's in a bit of a mess. I mean, Holmes is like, kind of, he's doing okay, but it's a one where you're like, I need to score runs, and he's going up against Michael King. That could really, favor the Padres. In the second one, David Peterson's been up and down. He goes up against Nick Pivetta, who's been great all year. And then Jonah Tong just had such a bad, game in his last one out that like the stories have all been about like what the coach has said to him and keep your head up and you're going to be great and all this stuff. So he's coming. He's got to be a little bit of a head case, and he's going up against Dylan Cease, who's up and down, and then it's Sproat against Darvish. So you could almost give the Padres the pitching advantage in every single one of those games.
No, I think you can. I think it's a bullpen we trust a little bit more, even though the Mets did a good job adding to that bullpen. I think we'd still take the Padres over them, especially with recent form being dropped in there. I will say, though, for Tong getting roughed up badly in his third big league start, if you need some inspiration, look at Bubba Chandler. He got hit by the Brewers 2 starts ago, 9 earned runs in 2 2/3, came right back. 6 innings of 1-run ball, 7 Ks, no walks against the Nationals. I think he had a perfect game into the 5th inning of that start. So we saw Chase Burns get hit by Boston. Like it's just part of breaking into the big leagues. You just have a day where it's not crisp, and big league hitters punish you for it. So I would still take the C side of that matchup, but I wouldn't abandon ship with Jonah Tong because of one particularly ugly outing. It's just at a time when the Mets really can't afford that. So curious to see how that series gets rolling on Tuesday. Got Tigers at Guardians, kind of a big one for the Guardians too, as they keep trying to extend their season here with a strong finish in September.
Well, I mean, it looks like a really great slate this week, and I'm happy for it. I know I said that these weren't going to be meaningful games, and that that the playoff rotation was mostly set. And in my defense, nothing has changed yet in the playoff rotation. Nothing in terms of who's in and who is out. However, it has gotten tighter, and I'm happy for that because I'm also a baseball fan. So I'm happy to see the Giants playing it tight. We'll talk about them this week a little bit more. And I'm not necessarily happy to see the Mets kind of falling apart and letting the door back open. But, it's in terms of drama, the drama is tightening up a little bit. And I'm glad that there are meaningful games being played this week, and that particularly when it comes to Cincinnati, Seattle, Kansas City, this seems like a make or break kind of week. High drama.
Yeah, opportunities that can be cashed in for a lot of teams out there as they try and make things interesting for these final couple of weeks. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can find us on Bluesky, Sarris.bscott@social. I am DVR.bscott@social. If you have a need to get a subscription for The Athletic, theathletic.com/rates and barrels. If you don't have one already, that gets you the best deal that we have going right now. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.